think we're going to get a really good player. We're fortunate that there is a number of good centers in this draft. They all bring different elements. I would say anywhere from, you talk to most draft experts, anywhere from 2 or 3, I should say, on to probably 8 or 9. It's a pretty close group, and it is. I've been in the meetings. I've seen all the top 10, 12 picks on film and live, and I would agree with most every team's assessment that there's a good crop of players in that, and then after that point, probably in the 10-11 range, it starts to fall off a little bit. But there's always good players, even if it looks like you go down the list every year, there's guys in the second and third round that make impact in this league. So.
Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network. I am Braden Gall, and I am joined by Emma Lingan, as usual, but also, welcome back, Michael Gallagher. Good afternoon, folks. How are we doing today?
I'm great. I don't know how anyone else is. It's been a while since the three of us have been together.
Yeah, I was going to let Michael take the floor there with his trademark enthusiasm and just speak for everyone. We're all fired up to be here.
Nothing's changed.
It's a great week to be a Predators fan. Maybe, ? Big week for Preds, of course, as we'll discuss the draft today. And we're going to dive into all the different predictions and mock drafts and rankings and players. We heard a lot from Barry Trotz this week on Tuesday. What can we learn from what he had to say? A lot of words. How many actual messages from Barry Trotz in all of those words, where he interrupted 2 questions to just chat with the press conference in true Barry Trotz fashion. If you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. We will take all your questions about the top of the first round, the middle of the first round, the back half of the first round, all the things that we could happen this weekend, because frankly, this is the most impactful Friday night, maybe in the last 10 years of the organization, maybe the last 5 years. I don't know how hyperbolic I can be around this, but it will define the future of the organization, what happens on Friday and Saturday. So we'll discuss a lot of that, and you'll hear from Barry Trotz as well. And we'll talk a little Roman Josi, Trevor Zegras, and a new coach on the coaching staff. So lots of stuff to get to this week. Brought to you, of course, by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Sinkers Beverages, y'all. 4-time liquor store of the year. Sign up for the in-crowd, because they're going to help me and 440, and for all of you in the audience, throw a fantastic watch party on Friday evening. You're going to get drinks. You're going to get some food. So come on by Jasper's on West End starting at about 5:30. We're going to be there for the whole first round, hanging out, off-the-record conversations, good hangs, and all kinds of fun. So come swing by and hang out. I was tempted, y'all, to just say, like,
I just want to say, for the record, I'm not going to be at the draft party because my wife and I are going to be out of town. It's not because it's at Jasper's. Just want to throw that out there.
Well, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue is still the best barbecue in the city. However, Jasper is a former sponsor. I was tempted to say to everybody, like, hey, if you know the former sponsor, come on by on Friday about 5:30 and hang out. Come on by on Friday and hang out. So but then you have to know to show up, and I'd like people to show up. So lots of subscribers from Lower Broad Hockey are going to be there. There'll be some surprise guests, hopefully. So we'll see what happens. So come on out and come hang out at Jasper's, the next evolution of the sports bar, as we used to say. Sinkers Beverages is the proud sponsor of that party and of this show. And they're gonna have some fun stuff for you guys. So come on by. All right. So we already got some people in the comment section. Good to see all of you guys, Eddie and Kevin, as well. So I'll get to those in just a second. I want you both to comment on my sort of opening, my stance on this. The organization, we still don't know exactly what compete or rebuild means for Barry Trotz in his own head. There's conflicting reports over the last few weeks about what direction this franchise wants to go. It does feel like this Friday and Saturday will be a defining moment for the direction of the franchise for a long time to come. Is that fair? Am I overreacting? Am I being hyperbolic? Emma, I'll start with you. Is that a fair way to describe what's going to happen this weekend?
Being the hyperbolic part or
All of it.
Okay. No, I think that this weekend is I think it's a very big moment for the franchise in this sense. Obviously, the highest they've picked in the draft since they got Seth Jones at number 4 in 2013. So, I mean, it's momentous and it should be treated as such. However, I would also just like to add in that maybe let's not hinge our hopes and dreams for the entire future of the franchise on one evening. But that might be too much to ask. So
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I also think it's hyperbolic at the same time because I know
Nuanced, Michael. Nuanced.
Yeah,
I like it.
I do think who they pick is important, and who that player ends up becoming in the scheme of the future of the franchise is also important. But also, like Emma said, it's one draft, pick. Yes, it's the highest they've picked in over a decade, but also I get the sense that this is I don't want to say a make or break draft for Barry Trotz. I do think it's going to put more pressure on him if this draft pick ends up being bad. So if, say, Hagens is there and Martone is there, whoever they pick, obviously, say they go Martone, he's going to be compared to Hagens for the rest of his career pretty much. If they don't pick either one of those guys and they go another center, whoever that player ends up becoming, I think that's going to be tied to Barry Trotz's legacy as the general manager.
That's kind of where I'm at. I don't think it's the entire future of the organization hinges on these players. To your point, Emma, I think that's almost unfair. I think it's more about this will set the organization on a path, and that path will eventually define this era of the team. And if that's Barry trading out, trading up, trading 23 and 26, going to get a piece like a Trevor Zegras, it's going to define the direction of the franchise. That's sort of where I'm at with the gravity of it all. I agree with you, Michael, that this draft in particular, with 5 of the top 55 picks and a bunch of other draft picks, is going to sort of define Barry Trotz in terms of his front office and his regime and their ability to draft and develop talent. So we can argue about one player's value over another player, and I agree with you. They're going to be compared to each other, and we see this on the chat at Lower Broad Hockey, like, we passed on this guy to get this guy. And you could play that game in every league, in every draft for every team. Everybody passed on Jason Robertson. The whole NHL did. So everybody was wrong, including the Dallas Stars, before they came back and drafted him. So we can play that game a lot, and it's not necessarily fair. But if you step back and you say, this is the draft that's going to define Barry Trotz as a drafter, that part of his regime, I think it's fair to say that. This is going to put the team on a path, and that path could either be back to the top of the league and competing for championships, or it could be the mushy middle, or it could be bad. And this is that's where we're at with this.
I almost want to say don't put too much stock in the first round picks. And I know it's hard when you have the 5th overall pick. You should be getting a franchise changing player there. But if you look at the history of this organization, their biggest draft hits have been in the 2nd and the 4th round. So it's almost more important what they do later in the draft than what they do in the first round. So I just want to throw that out there for everyone else, because I know everyone's going to be obsessing over who they pick and who they didn't take at 5th overall. Yeah. But this team doesn't usually get most of its home run hits in the draft in the early round. It's the 2nd and 4th round, and they have a really good eye, especially for defensemen, but they have a really good eye for late round talent that other teams pass up. So I would almost, it's going to be hard. This draft is going to be judged on who the 5th overall pick is, but I think when we're judging this draft class a couple of years from now, it's going to be who the depth pieces are, who the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks are, almost more so than who the first rounders were.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the first 5 picks, right? It's 1, 23, 26, 35, 55, and maybe even 67 or whatever it is. It's what do you get out of that entire class? I think we got a lot of comments here. So first of all, from Kevin, should Emma be on the left so that when she looks mysteriously out the window, it won't look like she's looking at Michael? I find that funny. Anthony, I will read your comment, but you have to get my name correct. Brandon, can you read my last comment? Appreciate that one, Anthony. Question, guys. At number 1, would you be shocked if the Islanders chose anyone outside of Schaefer? Maybe a two-way center like I don't think Martone is considered a two-way center, or Frondell, because they need more depth. I seriously doubt Martone and Frondell at number 1 it's probably Misa or Schaefer. Anybody else? Hagens? Anybody else? I know Hagens grew up a Islanders fan. He's from Long Island. Maybe that's a part of this. So
I would say there's a 0.05% chance it's Hagens, but it's Matthew Schaefer all the way. There's no way they're passing up someone like that.
Yeah, it's Schaefer. I mean, Matthew Darsh has even said, like, he didn't come out and say, guys, we're not picking Hagens, but he essentially, like, he made a comment to the extent of, you know, like, we're picking based on the player and not where he's from, and that essentially was his way of saying we're not picking Hagens. If they don't go with Schaefer, it would be Misa. Like, that's the only other name I could see going number one.
Jeffrey says 2 more days until tanking for Hagens comes full circle. We have Barry Trotz talking about Hagens, so I kind of agree that if he's there at 5, I think they are going to take him. Daniel says Hagens or Denoye, either one would be awesome. I could be on board with that as well. Let's see here. Maybe the draft picks will brighten my day. Trotz's press conference did not. There was nothing wrong with the press conference. There was just not a lot of insight there either. Let's see here. What else we have? Okay. So we'll get back to your comments here in just a second because I want to play. Let's get into best available versus need, which is center, of course. And then we'll get into Hagen. So here was Trotz on Tuesday talking about need versus best available, sort of the dynamics at play at the top of the board.
A little bit more need, but if that player is available, you know, you can look at past drafts. I think I can't remember Brady Kachuk, player that went before Brady Kachuk. If you look at where it is now, they probably want Brady Kachuk based on where players go. So we're going to look at the best player, and if there's a big discrepancy, then position won't matter. But if there's very little, then we'll probably go a little more position. That's all.
All right. Did you guys hear him campaigning for Porter Martone there at number 5? Is that what you heard? That's what I heard? Don't everybody jump in at once.
Sorry, I'm like everyone else. I couldn't really hear the video. The audio was really, really low.
All right, I'll boost it in post. Basically, they're going to take a center unless there's a better player available. And is that better player Porter Martone? Because it's not really a defenseman and it's not a goalie, so it's really just about Martone. And it's where do they have Martone graded on elite skills and traits? Does he have elite winger skills and traits? Brady Kachuk to be better than the other guys on the board at center is what that comment is all about in my eyes.
Yeah, my two cents is if it's Hagens and Martone that are both there, I have this sneaking suspicion they're going Porter Martone. I feel like he's viewed as the more offensively elite player. And I think when you have a team that's starved for offense and when you bring in guys like Stamkos and Marchessault and things just go sideways really quickly like they did last year, you need to field a better team. You need to be able to put the puck in net. And obviously, Martone is not going to come in. Hagens isn't going to come in next year and immediately be contributors to the team. But I think down the line for a team that's been starved for offense pretty much since it became into existence, like I feel like Martone is probably going to he has the higher upside as a pure scorer. That said, James Hagens is a very good player. He's more of a playmaker than he is a goal scorer, though. I hate to use the Ryan Johansson comparison, but he's going to be more of a Ryan Johansson than a Connor McDavid or someone like that, where you can go out and get 30, 40 goals from him each season. I think Hagens probably 20, 25 goals, maybe 80, 90 points as a ceiling in the NHL. But I think Porter Martone, he's been compared a lot to Matthew Tkachuk. I do think the Brady Tkachuk comparison's a lot better. He's more of that power forward who can put up 30 goals for you. But I just feel like from people I've talked to, what I've seen, mock drafts, everything taken in totality, I think Porter Martone is their guy.
I don't know. I still if it's me, I still pick Hagens over Martone if they're both available. But I think realistically, one of those two is probably not going to still be available at number 5. So the decision might be made for them at that point.
I agree with that. So I know the volume's a little low, but I can't boost it while we're in the broadcast here. So I'll boost it on the podcast. But here was him talking about James Hagens and note the numbers about where he thinks James Hagens might get picked.
Hagens, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, he's a player right in our wheelhouse, and in those numbers. So I mean, he's a good example of a player who could go, probably as high as 2 or 3 and could later on in that. But he's a tremendous player. We're trying to assess, sometimes it's, Marchessault's a good example. If you take his career and you say, he couldn't play because he wasn't 6'2", and you're making a big mistake. This guy's won Stanley Cup and has been a playoff MVP. So sometimes the yardstick isn't and shouldn't be the deciding factor.
So he basically says, wouldn't be surprised if he goes as high as 2 or 3. I am under the assumption that James Hagens will not be available at 5. I think all this dropping down boards is a lot of just smokescreen for teams like the Predators who are trying to get James Hagens to fall to them at 5. And I would guess everybody at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is all saying the same thing. My assumption is that James Hagens will go before the Predators are on the clock. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a smart assumption. I mean, I feel like Chicago is eyeing Frondell just from what I've seen from mock drafts and what I've seen from a lot of other people that are in the know. Frondell is a very popular pick to Chicago at 3. Maybe it's because they feel like he fits their system better. I think if you're picking between Frondell and Hagens, I would go Hagens just because I like his upside and his ceiling a little bit more. But I do think you're right. One of those guys is going to be gone. I think, like Emma said, the decision is going to be made for him. I think it's not out of the question that Martone or Hagens go at 4 to Utah. It's kind of like Nashville's going to get whoever Utah decides they don't want, basically, is how I feel this is going. But I think just from what I know from a player evaluation standpoint, I'm willing to bet a lot of money that they have Martone evaluated and ranked ahead of Hagens. And it's not like a huge drop-off. I think they're very close in skill, and I think they're very close in a lot of things they do. I just feel like Nashville has Martone ranked a little bit higher than Hagens. But that said, you can't go wrong with either one of them.
Yeah, I think if that's like, again, to Mike's earlier point, if the two are still available and one gets picked over the other by Nashville at 5, then the two are going to be compared to one another until the end of time. And that's just how it's going to be. But they're just very different players, I think. And again, it really does, like, being at number 5, it's a weird spot to be in because it really does depend so much what the teams before you are doing. You kind of have the assumption, it's going to be Schaefer at 1 to the Islanders, Misa probably to San Jose. And then 3 and 4, Chicago and Utah, are kind of interesting because, like, to Mike's point, I agree. I hear that I've heard a lot about Chicago being in on Frondell, but then Utah is a little bit of a wild card right now. I think you really don't know what they're going to do. And that could really kind of change things a lot for the Predators. But again, I still am of the belief that, if we're going back to the Martone versus Hagens debate for a second, I still, I understand that Martone's more of the pure goal scorer, and I know how that looks enticing. I would just say that's great, but who's gonna give them the puck? Like, they don't have, the
Not important.
playmaking. I mean, they need that playmaking center, and yes, it's not as exciting, it's not as flashy, but I think that if you're really trying to rebuild, or not rebuilding, but I mean, if you're trying to build a core for your future, that has to start up the middle. And I think that if you're Nashville in this particular draft class and you don't take a center at number 5, it's really not a good look.
I think the worst case scenario here is Hagens and Martone go some form in 3 or 4, and then you're left with Denoyer and Frondell and Brady Martin, some of those other guys. You're still going to get a good player, but they're going to be a tier below. In my opinion, it's Schaefer and Misa, tier 1. Tier 2 is Martone and Hagens, and then tier 3 is everybody else. You would really want to get someone in that tier 2, tier 1 if you could. I still think we can talk about this because I'm still very much in fantasy land where they are trading up to 2 to get Michael Misa. They have the picks and they have the ammunition to make it happen, and I would absolutely do it. But I think if you can get Hagens or Martone, it's a win no matter who it is. If you're getting Denoyer or Frondell, you're still getting a good player. And like Emma said, you need to get a center. So I can see them coming away with the center at 5. I have this sinking feeling that if Martone is there, Martone's their guy.
So let me play out. So this is what I think. First of all, I agree. I would give up all 3 picks in the first round to go up to 2 to get Misa. Everybody agree with that? Emma, you agree with that?
I'd even throw Kemmel in there too.
I think they're going to want a defenseman probably more. So maybe it's Stasny, somebody like that. But
I
three,
would give up anybody
picks.
in the prospect pool that's not Tanner Molendyk to do it.
Fair.
Not multiple guys, but I would give up at least one prospect in all 3 first rounders to get Misa. I think he's that good.
I agree. If you can go, and I didn't realize he'd scored more points in his league than since Patrick Kane was in that league. That's kind of all I need to know like about that young guy. So I think it's Schaefer Misa. I think it's one of Frondel or Denoyer to either Chicago or Utah, and then Hagens is the other one. So I think Hagens is off the board, and I think one of the 2 centers is off the board, which means the Preds then have to decide. And that's literally what Barry Trotz said in that clip, which is center who might be graded slightly behind a winger who is clearly the best at his position in the draft. That is what I think is going to end up being the decision. If Martone is off the board, then I think it really opens them up to do something that we're not expecting, because then there's 5 centermen basically who are all graded about the same, who are all going to be beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And when I talked, after Trotz got done with his press conference yesterday, I went over and chatted with him, and I said, look, you guys drafted Tanner Molendyk 24th overall in the 23 draft. There was a lot of discrepancy around who the best defenseman was at that time in the draft. There was no clear consensus with draft experts or reporting around where the draft order fell at that time at that position. And I said, why did you guys think that? Why were you so convinced that Molendyk was clearly the best of that group? They kind of drafted him a little early, right? It's clearly worked out. And the entire conversation centered around elite traits. Go for somebody with some elite traits, and certainly his skating ability and a little bit of and his confidence were kind of an elite trait at that point in the draft at that position. Turned out that was right. So who has the elite trait? Is Porter Martone the elite trait? Goal scoring, size at a winger position? I don't know if Frondel or Denoyer have an elite trait. I think the Predators value Brady Martin's leadership and motor as an elite trait. I think Brady Martin could be the pick if Martone and Hagens are gone, because I think he has that thing that not the other guys have, which is that elite level of work ethic, compete, motor, and leadership. Were they A for Team Canada? Am I crazy? I think Jake O'Brien, by the way, way more complete prospect than anyone's given him credit for at this slot. I've been on him since the beginning, and I don't think anyone's talking about him. McQueen has some elite traits, size and skating ability for a player of his size. So who has the elite traits if it's 5 centermen there and Hagens and Martone are off the board? Or if it's Martone versus those guys, does he have elite traits to then remove position of need from the equation?
Martone absolutely has elite traits. I mean, you look at the offensive skill set and what he can do with the puck, and the fact that he can be that power forward. And I hate using James Neal as a comparison for every power forward, because then everybody automatically kind of pigeonholes him into what he can and can't be. And I don't think it's a great comparison, but I think kind of in the mold of what James Neal used to do. I think Martone has the higher upside as a pure goal scorer than pretty much, I would say, everyone other than Misa in the first round right now. That said, I do think what you were saying, Braden, the fact that Brady Martin is label him the Predator way. I think the fact that he's a Barry Trotz kind of guy, I think that they would put him in that elite category just for the fact that they would probably feel like he could transition to Andrew Burnett's system and transition into playing with the Predators probably more seamlessly than anyone else could. I don't think that's the way to go about it, but I do think Brady Martin has some upside. I look at him and the reason why I would hesitate if I'm the Predators, the reason why I would hesitate with Martin is you look at him and you compare him to Igor Surin, who they took last year in the first round. There's not really much difference other than the fact that Brady Martin probably can score 5 more goals a season than Igor Surin can. And I feel like you're going to run into, and that's what worries me about Barry Trotz building a team. You're going to run into a team of clones of the exact same players. We're talking Surin, we're talking Teddy Stiga. Throw Brady Martin in there if that's who they go. Then you have LaRue, Svechkov. Like you're going to have like so many carbon copies of the same player. That's what I would worry about with a guy like Brady Martin. I do think you're right. We talked about this a little bit on the draft podcast we did a couple weeks ago. Jake O'Brien is a very complete, well-rounded player, and he often gets overlooked. Someone is going to get a steal in the bottom half of the top 10 because everyone's overlooking Jake O'Brien, and he's going to fall to someone, and they're going to get an absolute gem of a first-round pick. And I think if Jake O'Brien is the pick at 5, I wouldn't be mad about it. I do think that Roger McQueen has some of those elite traits you're talking about, but because of the back injury and the injury concerns, I think they're getting overlooked. If McQueen was fully healthy, we're talking about Roger McQueen being a top 5 pick. If he is the pick at 5, I don't think he will be. But if he is, I could kind of be okay with it. The injury stuff scares me a little bit, but also Barry Trotz says he wants to take some swings. And I think there's no argument that Roger McQueen is the biggest high risk, high reward kind of player in that top 10.
I don't have like the numbers or the stats really to back this up. It's more of just an eye test thing for me. But I think kind of to Mike's point about building a team of copies of the same player, part of me worries a little bit that some of that happens like after the draft too, where it's like you take a guy like a Zach LaRue, for example, who's got a really, good offensive upside. Yes, he's tough and he's scrappy and he throws the body around, but like he was scoring a lot of goals in the AHL. And then it's like, what happens? He gets to the NHL and they turn him into a grinder. And that's just what they do. And it's like they take these players, which like you can do that when you're consistently picking in the bottom third of the draft order, I think. But when you're picking at number 5, you really can't do that. And again, like I totally agree with you. Brady Martin is a Barry Trotz guy. That is a Predators guy. That's like, if you had like a whole team of like Colton Sissons, like it's great to have them. It's great to have one of them, but you don't need a whole team of them. And so I think that it's one of those things where I have to give Barry Trotz and the Predators the benefit of the doubt right now because we haven't seen them pick this high in the draft order. If they were picking lower in the order, I would say I'd be far more concerned that they're going to go with the sort of the under the radar pick or the non-obvious pick because it's a guy that fits the Predator way. At number 5, I just have to assume at this point, and I have to hope that Brady Martin is presumably available at number 5, but so is James Hagens. I have to.
I'm taking James Hagens.
I know. And that's what I'm saying, that it's like people who are worried about Barry Trotz doing that. Like I would be more concerned if they were picking later in the order when they have to get a little bit more creative with their picks and their strategy and their roster building. But again, you already have all these pieces like Zach LaRue and Fedor Svechkov and, these sort of middle to end of the order forwards who like, that's great, but you can't keep drafting more of those. And I don't think that they're going to when it comes to number 5.
I do think we're underselling Martin a little bit to label him LaRue and Sissons. I think he's got some of that in his game, but the only reason he's even an option for any team, frankly, this high in the draft is that he's a guy who's also got extraordinary skills, meaning offensive upside. The question is does he have any one thing that is an elite trait? And I don't think he necessarily does.
I think he's a jack of all trades, master of none. He's pretty good at most everything, but he's not elite in anything.
I think he's a high level second line center, which is something the team needs. So let's not go crazy here. But that is not an elite trait. That's not an elite skill, other than the motor and the compete and the leadership, which could be off the charts relative to these other guys.
I think something also to keep in mind too is Martin has been granted mock drafts, put whatever stock in them you want to, but he has been mocked to as high as Utah at 4 in some of these mock drafts. His draft stock, there's no question his stock is rising. I don't know if it's going to rise enough to where he's a top 4 pick, but if that happens, I mean, you would love for Utah to take Brady Martin and then leave Hagens there for you. That would be an ideal scenario.
The more and more I think about this, and after listening to Trotz talk and then talking to him afterward yesterday, I think Hagens. I think they're. Here's how I would rank their board. If I had to guess, this is just speculation, not reporting this. I think it's Misa 1, Schaefer 2, I think it is Hagens 3, Porter Martone 4. And if he is available, I think their argument, and they better say this the second they step to the press conference on Friday night, he has elite goal scoring power forward skills, and we could not pass that up. That is the sentence you have to utter, because otherwise you have to guarantee the fans that he is better than like 6 other options at center who are all graded out about the same. And so I don't think, again, we can talk McQueen's elite skills, size and speed. We can probably talk about, Frondell, Denoyer. They all feel like really complete two-way players. Jake O'Brien. But nobody feels like they have that elite thing. And maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm not a scout that studies these guys, for 4 years in other countries. But Martone feels like he does have elite skills. And I feel like Trotz's communication to the press and to me yesterday was, he wasn't talking about this, but my takeaway was that Martone is pretty high on their board and that he's absolutely an option over centers for sure. And I don't know if that's the right thing or not. Here's the question. Do you take a 9.2 winger or an 8.7 center? Who's better for the club long-term? And I don't know the answer to that one.
I think if you're the Predators, you have to go center just because of you haven't had a guy like that. I mean, Ryan Johansson's the closest that you've had. And some would argue that he wasn't even a true number 1 center. He was more of a high-level number 2. And I understand that. But it's almost sad that the Predators have backed themselves into a wall to where if you get someone who's elite like Porter Martone would probably be a top 5 pick in most drafts. Yeah. It's sad that if you're going to take a guy like that and not take a center, you almost have to do damage control as soon as you make the pick and have like a prepared statement ready and explain why you took him over someone like James Hagens. And it's who's to say? I feel like from the player evaluation standpoint, purely not the fit with the team, not what does he mean in the future, not any of this stuff. I feel like from a pure player evaluation standpoint, Martone is probably a little bit ahead of Hagens in their book. I think it's more of like a 3A and a 3B situation. But just for everything we've talked about, I almost feel like you can't pass up a center. You haven't had a number 1 center in franchise history. The fan base is already revolting. You're already losing season ticket sales. Like I feel like you don't want to piss your fan base off any more than you already have.
Yeah, if Martone is there, I totally agree with Braden that you need to be able to explain and defend that decision, which is not to say that Martone is not a player with elite qualities, because he is.
Right.
But to like the earlier point, the fact is that this team, this organization has been so poor offensively, like with drafting and developing. And that really, I mean, it's evident everywhere, but it's especially evident down the middle. And I think that, the reason that I'm saying center over winger, no matter how high his offensive upside is, if it's a high upside winger, is that like centers don't grow on trees. And I'm not saying that wingers do, but I mean, like, it's going to be much easier if you have the center, if you have that elite center, like a true 1C in your system. It's going to be easier than to go out and build around that player than it is to have all of the other pieces and then to go try and find a center. So that's where I'm at with this. And it's difficult in this draft class because there are so many centers. There are so many high caliber centers. But that's all the more reason, I think, that you don't like, of course, it would be much easier and much more obvious if you just said like, well, if, all of the centers were, not projected to go until like 10th, then no, you wouldn't pick one of those guys over Martone. But when you're in this situation, I just think you have to.
Hugh Austin says it should be the highest offensive upside player. Martone is just better than Hagens. I don't think that's clear. I think I would be okay with Hagens being a more just as talented and just as much upside. I do think there's a great debate between Frondell and Denoyer. I don't think we really know who has the elite skills. They both seem like pretty solid two-way players. It seems like Denoyer might be more creative. Frondell a little bit more of a pure shooter. Maybe that's maybe that's the differentiator between those two. I do think if you're choosing between Hagens, Martone, Frondell, and Denoyer, which has always been the plan between those four, you're probably in a good place. The bottom line is if you take a player at center and you pass on Martone or not, it doesn't matter. You step to the podium and you say, we think he is a starting top-line center for our franchise. That's the argument, right? That's it. You don't need to say anything else. We think Anton Frundell will be our top-line center in 3 years. That's it. But you take the guy you think will be that. That's it. It's not more complicated than that, in my opinion. So, all right. There you go. Sinkers Beverages draft party coming up Friday night at Jasper's. Also, get the best brisket in the city from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Michael, any bold predictions for what's going to happen? Like they pass on Hagens and Martone to draft Brady Martin. They trade back because this is the argument, frankly, for trading back to like 8 or 9 is you can still get Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, Brady Martin at 8 or 9. I don't know what else you can get of value that makes it worth doing unless you're getting a player in return. Anything dramatic happen on Friday night? Are they trading those 2 picks away from Marco Rossi? Are they trading up to get another player in the top 15? What do you think?
I would say expect a trade from Nashville that involves one of at least a first or a second round pick. I'm not reporting anything, don't have any insight. I feel like it's almost too fun with just some of the rumors that have been out there not to just expect Barry Trotz to go apeshit and do something crazy. Like ESPN, I think it was Wyshynski or one of the ESPN writers threw out there, don't be surprised if the Predators dangle the number 5 pick to someone like the Islanders who want Hagens and want Schaefer. And I think they floated out Matthew Barzal or Noah Dobson, 2 guys that are on the trade block. That would be kind of interesting. Pittsburgh has the 11th and the 12th pick. I know that there's been a lot of talk about Pittsburgh trying to get up into the top 5. So if they want Porter Martone and you can go back and get the 11th and the 12th pick, maybe you take a swing on Roger McQueen and you get a defenseman and then you end up with 4 first-round picks. I think something crazy like that would be fun to see. We all know Barry Trotz come draft time, he just loses his mind and he's throwing out crazy-ass scenarios. I mean, he even said in an interview with The Athletic last year that it surprised him how much he was willing to give up to move up into the top 5 to get who he wanted. I think Caden Lindstrom was the target there last year. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Barry Trotz does something outlandishly crazy like that, where maybe he doesn't pick at 5 and he trades that pick and he ends up with more picks or he gets another prospect or something like that. So that would be fun to watch. And it would also be fun to see the group chat blow up in Lower Broad Hockey Substack, because we all know that anytime Barry Trotz does anything, like the chat's the place to go.
Go get Michael Misa. That is the plan. Go get Michael Misa.
I would love it if they did that. Honestly, and I know we've talked about this and I've thrown this out there. I would give up all 3 first-round picks in Joakim Kemmel to move up there. I know San Jose wants a defenseman. If you want to swap out Kemmel for Stastny or Ryan Ufko or pretty much anyone other than Tanner Molendyk, I'd be on board for that too.
All 3 in Stastny. Go get number 2 pick. I think you have to do that if you're San Jose because you still get a great center. You still get a great center. All the ones we just talked about potentially being 1C.
San Jose doesn't even need a center. They have
Martone.
Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. Like they're loaded at center. They if you could get a center back from San Jose, I mean, come on.
Martone could be available for them at 5, like we just talked about. So anyway, look.
Honestly, Martone, other than Schaefer, Martone makes the most sense for San Jose. They don't need another center. They're already loaded. They're looking at having to take some of their centers and move them out to the wing because there's just a logjam there.
You imagine Martone going 2 and then Misa goes to Chicago with that crew? That would make everybody so happy. How about this? Would you have get the 42nd overall pick and a 4th rounder next year for Trevor Zegras? Would you have kicked the tires on the injury-prone forward from Anaheim for Nashville? Because that seems like a pretty low asking price.
Is this even a question? We all know my my affinity for Trevor Zegras, and when I saw the package that Philadelphia gave up to get him, I immediately was like, Nashville could have easily topped that. So that tells me that Barry Trotz probably wasn't really interested in Trevor Zegras to begin with,
which
I think is a mistake. He's 24. Yeah, he has some injury concerns, but you know what? He was playing in a system in Anaheim that wasn't really conducive to his skill set. He was playing for a head coach in Greg Cronin that he absolutely hated. I've heard that off the record from some people that cover the Ducks. And
it's on the record now.
Yeah, on the record now. It doesn't matter. He's been fired, and I'm not even in the business anymore. What are they going to do? Take away my credentials? Fuck it, I don't care. But yeah, he hated Cronin. He was playing in a system where I'm not saying this is what he did, but if I was Zegras and I got injured and I was like, you know what, I could probably come back and play in the last 10 games of the year, or I could just take the rest of the year off. I'm probably thinking that looks pretty good because I don't like Cronin. So,
Michael, thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate it. And enjoy Friday and Saturday night, wherever you may be in this great union of ours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back on. Oh,
Awesome.
By the way, I will have an updated Predators prospect ranking after the draft, re-ranking everything. Hint, hint, Tanner Molendyk is going to be in the top 2. Going to be hard to knock him off of number 1, but it depends on who they pick. The top 10 this year is going to look a lot different than the top 10 when I did the prospect guide last year.
They're going to trade.
Be on the lookout for that.
They're going to trade Tanner Molendyk for the number 2 pick, draft Michael Misa, and have 2 new players in the top 2. So, Michael, thank you, man. Appreciate you, buddy.
Bye.
Emma, let me ask you a question. Can you draw any parallels, any things at all with Dylan Cousins, Trevor Zegras, and Marco Rossi at all? Is there anything at all that is there injuries, personality, maybe not fitting with the coach, contract? We know is the Minnesota reason, but like if a player's great, you generally figure this stuff out. And so I'm just curious if you, being on the national beat, can you thread anything together between those 3 guys being available at such a young age with such high level of talent?
Unfortunately, I think it's the situations or the circumstances are all too different. Like you said, with Rossi, it's a contract thing. They've got to clear the cap space to sign Kaprizov next year. They have to. For, with Cousins, I think I was of the belief when they signed him to that contract that was too early for them to do that. And that was more of a fuck up on Buffalo's part, that, you shouldn't have been signing him. He had 1 good year and you signed him to this really long extension. And, Buffalo's Buffalo. They haven't been to the playoffs in so long. And I think that it does, like, it's hard, to kind of build any kind of winning culture there when that's the case. And they have trouble attracting free agents there as well to build around. They get these good players in the draft, but then they can't build around them because no one wants to come there. So, and then with Zegras, it was just a fit thing. I think, like, whether it's he didn't like the coach, they were drafting where Anaheim was and the players that they were drafting who were coming in behind him. It's like, it felt like he was sort of a man without a home. It didn't really, they tried to put him on the wing and then they were putting him center, but in the bottom 6. And then it was like, he didn't really have a place and identity. And I think that, again, that's more of a situational thing. And I think that with Philly, he will have more of an identity. And it's funny because I think a lot of, I think it's a lot of like question, well, can Zegras be the true number 1 center in Philly? I'm like, honestly, for what they paid for him, they don't need him to be.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
He can be a 2C, and that's more than fine.
The 35th overall pick and a 4th next year, which the Preds, I believe, have an extra of, like, give me a break. You should have made that deal. Now, again, I think Rossi, a little undersized. Cousins, unsure if that's overpay or not. Zegras, injuries and fit. And, there's something a little off about all 3 of them, because if all 3 of them were elite and great players, they would find cap space for them. So it's not that and obviously Cousins already signed the deal. Buffalo's Buffalo. So I agree with that part of it. I think all 3 of them are worth trying to go after, but I think they're all available for a reason. And I don't think we know exactly 100% why they're all available. Some of that's not their fault. Some of it might be their fault. So we shall see. All right. I want to ask you about Luke Richardson just real fast here, because they made a change on the coaching staff. Finally, they are not running the exact same staff and the exact same roster back. I guess we need to talk about Eric Halla. I don't know if that counts as sort of a salary cap play, because he's due $3.1 million next year, and they can trade him because it's his last year on the book. So obviously a guy who knows the city and the arena, formerly a Predator. So they have made a couple of small changes, but Luke Richardson, of course, former Chicago head coach, been a defenseman in this league for a very long time. What do you make of the move in a point on the team that was not very good last year?
I mean, I think it's good. I think, I have no reason to believe that it won't be a good move, because I think that it's, kind of the sweet spot there where it's a younger coach with a fresh perspective, but he's also got head coaching experience. I think it's important to have someone who wasn't here through the, just slogging through last season, because it's really hard to bring a fresh perspective when you were here for all of that last year. Now, does, like, a lot of times the assistant coach, like how much of an impact is that going to have? I think it depends on the structure of the coaching staff and what you want there. But I do think that him working with the defense, I am glad that the new hire was someone who has an eye for the defensive side of the game, because they need that.
Yeah, that needs to, as you and I kind of laid out on our timeline for the rebuild last week on the show, they've got to fix the blue line this year. I don't think you can fix the center position, but I think you can fix the blue line by the end of the season, whether that's prospects, whether that's trades, whether that's draft picks, whether that's a coach developing some young guys. They've got tons of guys that all you need is one of them to be a starter. And, Lozon stays healthy, and the defense core could look very different, spring of next year.
Yeah, and I will also say that, going back earlier when we were talking about the potentially trading the number 5 pick, or any draft picks for that matter, I think if you're going to do that, if you're Nashville, you've got to be getting NHL players in return. You, like, especially with, Noah Dobson was mentioned. Now he's a guy that, he might take the number, like, he'll probably take the number 5 pick for you to get him from the Islanders. But, he's a guy that they've said they want to build around, and he's like a 70-point defenseman, young, big, like, just fits the mold, I think, for what the Predators are looking for. But the problem is the Islanders would like to keep him, they want to build around him. And so I think that he's part of this new guard they're bringing in New York. So, but that being said, I'm like, if he were available, I would be happy with the Predators going and getting a player like that.
I think spending big, whatever that means, dollars, draft capital, prospects, whatever it means, to get a bona fide star defenseman, I think this is lost on the fan base a little bit with our obsession with a center and 20 years of inability to draft one. They have found guys at wing. They found Forsberg for nothing. They found the guy they traded for Forsberg late in the draft in Martin Erat. They found Craig Smith. They found Victor Arvidsson. They drafted Kevin Fiala. Maybe shouldn't have let him go, but like, they have drafted scorers, goal scorers on the wing. And so our obsession sometimes, I think, covers up the fact that this organization has been brilliant at drafting defensemen and goaltenders. And that is the reason this organization has been competitive. Anytime it's been competitive was a defense core that was exceptional in front of an elite goalie. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't focus on offense and find a centerman for the first time and invest at number 5 in that pick. They were trying to in 2013 when they ended up with Seth Jones. They were trying to draft a center with that pick. So I'm not saying that you ignore it or just that it's not a real story. It is. But right now, the goaltending in the defense is not what it was in 17. It's not what it was the years before when they had really good teams. It's not what it was when they won the President's Trophy. It's not what it was when they won the division the following year after the Cup. Those teams were built on an elite defense core, an elite blue line, and great goaltending. You can still be a great franchise consistently year after year with that as your core identity. And I don't have a problem with them leaning back into that identity. I don't think you do it with this number 5 pick. But if you can go get a star defenseman for you would give up 2 first-round picks for a star defenseman, and you come back with Yossi, Shea, and player X, and you fix your blue line, you call up Molendijk. There are much worse ways for the Predators to get back to playing good hockey than to get back to their roots. And I think that is nails on a chalkboard for some fans that want a different path, a different journey, a different style and strategy. I don't know. Having a lockdown blue line and a great goaltending situation is a pretty good way to start every season. Just, it's worth noting. That's all.
Yeah, it is well documented at this point that I'm a UC Saros apologist, and I think that that is their identity, though. Like, you have a goaltender, like a goaltending staff and a defense core, or you did before this year, who could steal you games. And I hated how much of the hate that Saros was getting last year for not stealing games, and because that's what he had been doing before. And it's like, but that's the thing. The defense isn't there in front of him anymore. And we saw now what a huge drop off there was without Roman Josi. And listen, Yosi's not going to be around forever either. So I think if you're Nashville, you've got to start getting ready for life after Roman Josi. And, they've started to do that with Molendyke and Gibson and that. But I mean, you need more than that. And if that is going to be where you're going to go. And again, Josi, not just important in his own zone, but I mean, he's been one of their scoring leaders every year. So that you have to account for that too.
All right, I'm not going to play the clip here, and we'll end on the Roman Josi conversation since we're now talking about him. Sinkers Beverages, of course, at Jasper's on Friday night. Sinkers Beverages is going to be a sponsor of that live draft party. We got the game room there with shuffleboard and air hockey and the big screen. It's going to be a ton of fun. You'll get some drinks and some apps there. Of course, special thanks to Sinkers for helping 440 and Lower Broad put that all together. Hopefully some special guests will pop by, and we're going to have a good time for all you subscribers that want to come hang out. We're going to do that free for entry, so come on out. And so I'm not going to play the clip, but basically Josi was diagnosed with the issue we talked about last week. The Preds were forced to put out a statement very quickly after we did our show, sort of finalizing everything or officializing everything. And it sounds like that they got the diagnosis a long time ago and that he was dealing with it throughout the entire course of the season, and that the organization, of course, knew about it. Barry Trotz mentioned Katie Ledecky overcoming this exact same thing. And he's not wrong. If Katie Ledecky can go on to win gold medals at the Olympics as the greatest female swimmer on the planet, then Roman Josi can probably play some hockey. It seems like he's going to be refreshed and ready to go. Here is my weird feeling, though, on this. I'm not reporting this. This is based on years of conversation with Roman Josi over time, and my sort of like 20 plus years of knowledge of this particular type of injury. Not this one specifically, but head injuries. I think fans of the Nashville Predators need to be prepared for the end of Roman Josi's time in Nashville. Whether that is a trade, whether that is giving him a chance to go win a cup somewhere else, whether that is an early retirement because he is very, very committed to life at home. He is a smart, thoughtful, nuanced dude who understands the value of his brain working long time into the future. He is the carbon, like he is the avatar for the guy who walks away just a little earlier than you expect because of how he views things and how he looks at his family. And we talked about it last week. One hit, it could happen in game 1. It could happen in game 100. It only takes one hit for this to deteriorate quickly. And so I just had this feeling, Emma, it's not a conversation I've had with anybody. I'm not reporting any of this. I have a feeling that Predators fans need to be prepared for life without Roman Josi, whatever that looks like, earlier than they might think.
I mean, I've been saying that, I mean, not exactly that, but I, have likened him to Mark Borowiecki in that way that, sometimes you just got to know when to walk away. And I'm not at all saying that that's this year or next year. I don't know. And only he will know when that is. But I do think that that's, the point is correct that, like, yes, Roman Josi is defying the odds in the way that he plays, like he's still a huge factor, a huge contributor, even at his, quote unquote, older age. At this stage in his career, he's still a central piece of this team. However, you've got to be you've got to be ready to move on. And it all fits into what I've been saying. It's a small piece of what I've been saying for a long time, which is that the Predators need to stop trying to run it back with the same core from the 2017 Cup run. Yeah, and Roman Josi was a big part of that. He can still be a big part of the team this year and next year, however long he wants to keep playing. I'm not saying put him out to pasture or anything, but I'm just saying that you need to be ready for, like you're saying, for that moment to come.
Yep. And I think it's going to come sooner than people realize. I think it could be abrupt, either a trade or retirement. And call it a feeling. That's all. Call it a feeling. Quickly here, I'll let you go on this. Emma, go to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for the best brisket in the city. Sinkers Beverages. We'll see you guys on Friday night. Sign up for good coverage of the Predators, lowerbroadhockey.com. Here's the thing. Gallagher just sent us some new odds on the pick. So I want your final pick here before we go. And that is right now, odds according to BetOnline, Anton Friendel is the number one pick, or the number one odds pick for Chicago at 3 at 2 to 5 odds. So very high odds that Anton Friendel is the number 3 pick. Michael Misa and Porter Martone are numbers 2 and 3 on that list for Chicago in terms of odds. The number 1 odds pick for Utah, or whoever's picking number 4 overall, is Caleb Denoyer at 4 to 7. So also very high odds for him there. Brady Martin is actually 3 to 1. That's got to be tied to the rumors around Utah being connected to him. Porter Martone, 5 to 1. And then for the Nashville Predators, James Hagens, number 1 on the list at number 5, 5 to 4 odds. Porter Martone, 2 to 1 odds. Caleb Denoyer, 5 to 1. Brady Martin, 11 to 2. So it feels like Hagens, Martone, Denoyer, and Martin, which we just talked about ad nauseum, seems like the pick. It does feel like Hagens and Martone are the 2 that they could be choosing from, and I agree with you. That could be made for them. All right, last chance, and I'm going to hold you to it. This is the most important thing you've ever said on the show. Who do the Nashville Predators pick at number 5 on Friday night?
James Hagens.
I sure hope you're right.
I hope I'm right, too.
I sure hope you're right. You're going to have to tune in to Lower Broad Hockey to see my official prediction, because I sure hope it's James Hagens. I think that's the right pick for them to make. I think that's the player they should pick. And if he's on the board and they pass on him, I think that will be a mistake. So I'm going to go with you. But we're going to have a roundtable with our actual predictions coming up on Lower Broad Hockey coming up this week before the draft. So make sure you check that out. That is not who I'm predicting them to take at number 5. But you got to go subscribe.
I'm going very off-brand and staying positive for this prediction.
Yeah.
It feels very weird.
Look at you.
So, but you know what? I'm sticking with it. I unfortunately will not be there at the draft party for you all to ridicule me for when I'm wrong, but you can do it other places, I guess.
The question is, what pick will make the gathering more entertaining? You mean Hagens or passing on Hagens? I think passing on Hagens makes the gathering real interesting. I think taking him, everyone's like, way to go, let's roll. But I think passing on him makes the whole entire party a very different vibe. The vibe shift real fast if they pass on James Hagens. Otherwise, thank you all for hanging out. We'll see you guys Friday night. Come on by. I'll be there about 5:30. Hopefully my daughters will make an appearance as well if we can. They're having some personal issues right now around the house, Emma. I'll tell you about it later. But come on by on Friday night. Jasper's on West End. Free parking. Great place to hang out. Big supporters of the Nashville Predators. Otherwise, we'll talk to you guys there. We do appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you soon.